Let me they can hear me on the Honda.
Oh, yeah, turn your phone off.
How do you do that?
You just push, don't talk.
Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, folks who are watching online. I want to welcome you all to our public work session for today. Also, I want to acknowledge our city manager, Mr. Stephen Carter, our city attorney, Wanda Graham-Williams, and our city clerk, Ms. Deborah White. I want to thank the city staff, of course, and everyone who's participating today. And with that, I will ask Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant.
Present.
Dr. Dotson.
Here.
Mr. Hugel.
Present.
Mr. Moody.
Here.
Ms. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Tillage.
Here.
Mayor Glover.
Here. I see Mr. Carter is over there smiling. I don't know if he's smiling because the work session is starting. Or
Of course.
Because he has something good to share. But in any event, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Welcome, Council, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Have a couple of presentations this evening. Both, I think, will generate a little discussion. The very first one will be short-term rentals. I think she's here. Is Dr. Russell? Yes, she's here. All right. It's going to be followed by our new CFO and our budget director, Mr. Trey Burton. They're going to talk about our budget outlook. So first of all, we have Dr. Russell. He's going to get the hot topic started.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Russell.
Happy Tuesday to everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
My week goes downhill from here, so tonight, starting and ending. All right, we're going to, at the request, I believe it was from Council, Mr. Carter shared with me on our trip to Greenville that you wanted some information about short-term rentals and Portsmouth regulation of short-term rentals in comparison to how our neighboring localities in the region regulate this use. What we're looking for this evening is just some feedback from Council relative to how we proceed with amending our ordinance to regulate this use. And we're going to start with some discussion about why it's even a topic. With respect to short-term rentals, oftentimes when I think about it, and I'm a user of short-term rentals, when we take our fall girls trip, we like to stay in properties that we could not afford personally. And it is a lot of fun. But I do recognize that it can be a nuisance to neighbors and adjacent property owners for a couple of reasons. So not just personally, but professionally, what neighbors and adjacent property owners experience is noise, parking, often lots of vehicles on the subject property as well as on adjacent public rights of way, and then safety. But let me describe safety in the context of neighborhoods. When you live in a community, or when we live in communities, there is some comfort that comes with knowing who is coming and going, right? Mm-hmm. What's routine, and even if it's not routine, if it is a blip and it's every now and then someone has a larger than normal gathering at their home, that is tolerable if it's not every weekend, every month, every holiday season. And that becomes the nuisance sometimes for short-term rentals, and why you feel the pressure as a locality and appointed and elected members of a community to provide some relief to property owners, so that, I love this term that we use in planning all the time, that my quiet and peaceful enjoyment of my property does not cause a burden on your ability to quietly and peacefully enjoy your property. We have to be neighborly, right? So in context, what is it? So the short-term rental is the rental of a dwelling for a period that's less than 30 days. And I believe it's, I was just at the very beginning of the meeting speaking with some of our citizens that supported this statement that it is a growing activity in the city of Portsmouth, and it is raising concerns about noise and parking and trash and safety. But aside from that, there are some issues relative to fairness. And so if a short-term rental entrepreneurial or business interest is offering short periods of tenure at a property, that does compete with other proprietors like hotels and motels, and they're doing so at costs that those other vendors aren't necessarily have to absorb that the short-term rental property owner doesn't. Your occupancy taxes, your franchise fees, and things of that nature. And so one of the comments that was made recently is that we have to consider the stakeholder interest, and stakeholders are both the proprietors, the property owners of short-term rentals, as well as those adjacent property owners and neighbors who live adjacent to those properties. And we propose to accomplish a balance in the interest of stakeholders by bringing all parties to the table as we deliberate and develop these ordinances. Okay, so Portsmouth currently does not have any prescriptive regulations for short-term rentals. And so we defer to a provision in the Code of Virginia that stipulates that if a property owner lives in the property, then they are able to also use it dually or as an accessory use to offer residency for periods of less than 30 days to other parties. For that reason, nothing is required. There is no business license that's required, and it's my understanding that the Commissioner of Revenue has administratively made that decision. And if you'll recall, one of the comments that I made last night is that in the administration of the Portsmouth zoning ordinance, if a use is not prescriptively outlined and regulated, then it is not permitted. And because this use is not prescriptively outlined, our local ordinance is silent. We don't regulate it, but the Code of Virginia requires that we permit it by right as long as the property owner lives in the property. And so many property owners in the city of Portsmouth are moving forward under those guidelines. You'll also recall that last night I commented that, I want to go back to the vendors. I looked at Vrbo and Airbnb, and there were many, many, many listings and offerings for the city of Portsmouth. And so, and trying to get a feel for what is the impact in our community, what I was able to determine is that if the entire property is offered, all of the bedrooms, all of the bathrooms, the pool, then that means that the property owner is operating outside of the stipulations of the Code of Virginia, and we could enforce non-compliance through our zoning officers and our my office, the provisions of the ordinance in my office. That would be difficult, though, and incredibly burdensome because we do not have prescriptive requirements in our ordinance. I did speak with our zoning staff, and I'll just be frank with you, what we were told is that we have only had 6 property owners that are operating short-term rentals that have come in to get a zoning clearance. And then I also shared with you that for Airbnb and Vrbo, there were more than 20 pages of listings, right, on in Portsmouth where they offered the entire property. So that anecdotally does suggest that we have a problem. We have a problem. And without redress, that's a problem that will probably bubble up and get worse. So what is happening regionally? We have our regional partners, I would say with the exception of Suffolk, all of our regional partners, neighboring communities have some provisions for the regulation of short-term rentals. Newport News prescriptively does have, matches the Code of Virginia where the property owner does have to reside in the property, maximum of 6 persons that can be in the property for short-term rentals, and then they have a parking standard that's for every 2 persons or 2 bedrooms, there has to be 1 parking space. We have just begun to look at this in terms of benchmarking what would fit in Portsmouth in comparison to the region. So we don't have specific recommendations right now, but I would say that as a common practice, planning practice, you look at what's going on in the region. So I'll give you a perfect example. So I learned this many years ago. In 1985, in fact, at Virginia Tech, that has a drill field that separates the campus. And so as a planning study, we had to determine what were the best ways to put paths across the drill field to the administrative offices, right? And what we decided to do was just see where the paths were worn, where the grass was worn, and that's where the sidewalks that cross the drill field went. And so you can apply that standard even to this. What is going on in the community? Where are our Airbnb, short-term rentals predominantly located in the community? What are some of the problems in those areas as we're hearing from our citizenry? And then do we want to address those and permit them in those areas? Chesapeake, for example, only permits short-term rentals in their agricultural and historic overlay districts. Nationally, when we benchmarked and looked at Planning Advisory Service, the recommendations to put them where your visitors and tourists are located, so in your entertainment areas and those venues, rather than community-wide. And then there's some other communities that have distance requirements for how frequently they would be in an area. So those are some things that we should consider. Almost all communities that have regulations do require a registration and licensing requirement for the short-term rentals, and that's an opportunity to capture missed revenue as well as regulate locations. So occupancy taxes, inspection fees, registration fees will help with the burden of enforcement that comes along with regulating the use. All right, next step. So this is important. All of it's important, but this is especially important, especially that last bullet for time frame. Is 6 months by the end of the year going to meet the expectations of our council, the expectations of our manager? We heard very clearly last night that the council embraces community engagement and stakeholder engagement as we develop any and all of our regulations, and that's important too, and it's a best practice in planning. It will lengthen the process. However, we would like feedback from the council regarding the feedback that you're gleaning from our citizenry for short-term rentals, what you desire in terms of how we move forward, and we'll take that, prepare a draft ordinance, and outline the pros and cons of various aspects of the ordinance, share that with our stakeholder groups, tweak those draft ordinances as many times as necessary to reach consensus before we would bring it forward for public action. And so at this point, we are interested in gathering your feedback, and we are listening attentively.
Vice Mayor Moody.
I would add parking to one of the problematic areas, and also neighborhood character. I think when you have a lot of these short-term rental places coming into a community, it can literally change the character of the neighborhood. And also hotels. When you check into a hotel, you got to register with your legal name, show identification, contact. I think there should be a requirement for the same thing, because really Airbnb or short-term rental is a hotel for that period of time. So that there should be some registration vehicle for those as well. So that's my 2 cents worth. I'm glad we're addressing this because it has become a problem in Portsmouth. And we've had instances where there have been shootings involved with parties at short-term rentals. There have been evidence that places were rented to underage folks, and drinking was going on. So there's a litany of things that have come to my attention via communication back from citizens who had to experience the impact of short-term rental places. So that's me. That's mine.
Well, Vice Mayor, thank you for kicking it off. We'll go to Councilwoman Thomas next.
Well, the Vice Mayor, the last part of your comments was going to be my comments, Dr. Russell. I'm glad we're addressing this because I do believe there's a balance that we want to strike. So putting some type of ordinance together. My concern was with the any crime issues that we've experienced where we have kind of off the books short-term rentals that have been rented for parties, like the Vice Mayor said, and that have led to some crimes and so forth in the neighborhoods. That was my concern, and if we could, maybe if we had some data about some of those that are currently on the books that have experienced those type of issues. I know of one, but I'm sure there might be others. All right, pause there.
And if I could add, just to add to your point, if my recollection is correct, I think we had a situation in property in Old Town where there was a fatality. Because I remember doing the walk. So
Right.
It was a young person involved in a fatality at a short-term rental. And so there were a lot of questions behind that, right in Old Town. So that's a very serious concern. Ma'am?
Yeah, agreed.
Councilwoman Bryant, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, and thank you, Mayor. Definitely, I agree with Councilwoman Thomas's point that it's about balance because we do want people to feel welcome coming here, particularly with something like America 250 coming up, and we have hotels in the works, but not here yet. So I do agree it's about balance. This may be a question that's hard to answer, but maybe something I'm curious about, how the short-term rental supply, I guess for lack of a better word, impacts our housing supply. So, for example, if there's a house in a neighborhood that is a nice family-sized house, affordable house, or what do we call that, the missing middle kind of house, if that's an Airbnb, that's a missed opportunity for someone to bring their family here, invest here, grow here, be part of our schools here, be part of the community here. So I know you said, Dr. Russell, there's pages and pages of entire houses that are not, that are available on short-term rentals, but something maybe just to keep in the back of our minds, how is that impacting our housing supply? Might be insignificant, might be significant.
The information, the research didn't really speak to that. It spoke to increasing rental property rates for, long-term leases. Would think that as long as it's operated so that it doesn't appear to function any differently than from a single-family residence or family occupied residence, it would not impact values as long as adjacent values, as long as it's maintained.
I guess,
but we can certainly look into it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I guess what I'm kicking around in my mind is the point that you made earlier, which is if it's a family or someone living in the home, they're investing in the community in other ways besides being here temporarily. So, something to think about. Thank you.
Councilman Hugo, and then Councilman Dodson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So first a question and then some thoughts. So on the second slide, you've drawn a picture with somebody, next one, Yeah, so the person in the bottom floor there on the left-hand side, so does owner occupied mean that when the guests are there, the owner is also there?
Yes.
Or is it, I own the house and I'm gone for the weekend and I can let somebody come in and rent the house for the weekend? I'm occupying the house 99% of the time, let's say, but when I'm not there, somebody else is in there.
So I'll give you Newport News definition.
Okay.
186 days out of the year, the owner has to reside in the property. So.
Okay,
partly-
but that doesn't necessarily mean the owner's in the house while the guests are in the house.
No, it could operate either way.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, so then maybe the fact that you found 20 pages where every bedroom in the house is listed doesn't necessarily mean that they're not complying with the code if they're leasing the house, the whole house for Saturday and Sunday while they're out of town or something. But I'm willing to bet not all 20 pages are in that category. They're probably in that right-hand category, and we just haven't captured them. Okay, so kind of going back to the discussion we had last night during the work session about how can we learn from what we've just been through. I think we said we want to make sure we give ourselves enough time to do the work that the code writers need to have to be able to do the work without painting ourselves in a corner to rush. We certainly over and over said we got to stay engaged with the community, and as soon as this came up on the announced agenda for tonight, we started receiving emails from the community. I'm told that there's already a group in Old Town that's been kind of stood up to take a look at short-term rentals in Old Town. I think without prescribing that we use something like that, I think, Manager, the recommendation ought to come from you. How do we get the benefit of getting the voices of those people who have been studying this for a while? Because there are folks out there that are way more knowledgeable about short-term rentals than certainly than I am, and so we do want their opinion. But then, as I said last night, we also want the opinion of the neighbors. So it's not just the people that are in the business, it's the people who are affected by the business. And so whether we put a task force together for you all to work with, to bounce ideas off. And then the other thing that I'll suggest, so a couple of months ago I forwarded to the rest of council the playbook that the mayor and I got from a briefing that we went to that was done by the Airbnb local outreach group that basically outlined these are the things that you should consider when you're in the process of doing what we're now getting ready to do. You might expect, because it came from a short-term rental business, that they were going to make things as easy as possible on the folks who are working as clients of theirs inside our city. But in fact, I thought it was a pretty fair thing, because kind of coming back to the discussion about parties, they have a rule that you can't rent a place to have a party. And they put that rule in place because their reputation's on the line for I rented Airbnb and look at the mess I created in the neighborhood because I had a big party and things got out of hand. So that I felt like that playbook was at least a good starting place for the kinds of questions that we should be wrestling with as we work to draft the ordinance. And it addressed, how do you let the rest of the neighbors know that your house is going to be Airbnb or short-term rented for the weekend? Who do they contact if there's an issue? What are the noise limits, the parking limits, how do you take care of those issues that you've listed as part of that playbook? And I think, again, they were pretty fair in addressing or suggesting that each of those issues be thought through and addressed in the ordinance. And then, while I appreciate that we have several other Hampton Road cities that have gotten out there ahead of us, the good news is they are out ahead of us and are sharing now the lessons that they've learned and maybe the things that they did that aren't working very well for them, or the things that are working really well. So we need to continue to have those dialogues with our neighbors here in Hampton Roads to take the best of what's working for them.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Dodson, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I've been intimate with Airbnb for a while as a host and as a user, and run into some of the problems that we've had. One of the things we restricted with our rental was no parties. We also turned it into a 2-day minimum rental, which knocked out almost all the partiers, because all the partiers wanted it for a one-night rental. And that might be one of the restrictions that we have, is that because somebody with a house that has the space for it might want it as an entertainment venue, where they want to have it, and that should, I think, be restricted by us, to say you can't do that, or we restrict it in certain neighborhoods out there. But there's some specialty houses out there, and my next one will be a very specialty rental for a unique experience. And I look at sometimes the density that we might be considering and saying, well, wait a minute, you might restrict me from having mine because for overdensity, which is a very specialty rental that only couples are going to use for special occasions. A very, very quiet venue along those lines. I believe that the Airbnb and all the other services can collect taxes on these from us. I don't know what the state law allows us to put a special tax on these, like the hotel taxes, but I do know that some of those services will forward that tax to us if we have the right to collect it. I don't know. Do you know whether we have the right to collect that or not? Like a hotel tax on
Occupancy
these?
taxes were standard in what I saw, collecting them the same way they do for motel hotels in those
Lodging
localities that
tax.
have them.
That's what it's called.
The biggest problem, though, I see is enforcement of that, and we're seeing enforcement problems all over. So my biggest thing that I'm going to ask is, when we get to the point of looking at it, is how are we going to enforce it, and are we going to be able to do that? How? And I don't know. I'm sort of looking around the city going, we're having a big problem with manpower and attention to the items that we already have. As far as the owner on site, there's another way of doing it, and that is a manager available also too.
A local contact.
Yeah, a local contact that must be available. And there's also things we can consider, like if they do have a noise violation or something, that they are then restricted on that if there's so many violations for it too. I am not in favor of a density, though, especially because these are a popular item. They're becoming a big cultural item for us. So it'd be nice if we can keep them calm and say, no parties, no more people. The biggest thing that I saw that helps us out, though, is that the person renting it is the person that checks in. Must be the person staying there, because sometimes you'll get a parent renting it for a high school group to get together, and I'm not sure that I would ever want that to happen on my property where somebody rents it for somebody else. And we found that in some of our rentals also restricted a lot of the undesirable activity on the property. Also, if we do form a committee on this, as a person who's done both sides of it, I'd very much like to be participant in that activity.
Very good, sir.
Good feedback.
So, yeah, Councilman Cooper, go ahead.
And just one other point. When we think short-term rental, we're always thinking about places for people to go spend the night. but there's also one of those services that's a short-term rental for your swimming pool in the backyard.
Oh, yeah.
I know we've had
Tents,
some,
too.
yeah, so swimming pool, motor home, whatever. I mean, so we got to make sure that our short-term rental ordinance, because if you're renting a swimming pool, you ain't renting it for the weekend. You're renting it for a party. And we've had more than a few emails from swimming pool rentals that went haywire with people parking in people's yards and some of that stuff. So we need to maybe look at that collection of proprietors that you had on your list there, Dr. Russell, and see what else fits in the category and has our language covered all of the versions.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions. Based on your data or any research that you've done, and I don't need the answer tonight, how does these rentals impact, or do they impact property values? Are they seen favorably in most communities? I understand people are using them. That doesn't mean they're seen favorably because people are using them. But at the end of the day, is there any data that suggests that it impacts the values in the community or the quality of life in the community? Good question.
I would say, my honest response is I don't know the answer to that yet. And so it's just kind of anecdotally, if you don't know what it is, and if so what we call a curbside survey, that it just looks like, operates like a single-family house, it should have no impact at all. But if it does, it would be impactful just as if you had wayward tenants that live next door.
Absolutely, and that was part of my thought process. Also, I'm very concerned that it seems to me that in our city, we challenged with regulating things that speak to the quality of life in our city, and we get ourselves caught up in a situation, perhaps, where we have to do these things, and it's important that we do, but we really need to, those fundamental things that make a city strong like this, and I'm not against business owners and folks wanting to participate in this opportunity. In fact, I had a number of emails. One of them was from some individuals that don't live in the city of Portsmouth. Actually, they live out of state. They have a home in Mount Herman, and they explained to me in their email that they rent their home out. But to the point, I didn't get to respond back to them, but a valid point that Mr. Dotson brought up, where is the continuity? If something were to happen at that residence, who's going to deal with that locally? And so there are a number of different questions that I would have, and I know we're going to get there. I'll be honest, I think 6 months is a long time. I don't think we need 6 months. I think that this is an important challenge. We need to go to work on it as soon as possible, and we need to put a framework in place, certainly look at best practices. But more importantly, as Mr. Carter frequently says, we need to begin to set a standard in our city. We welcome these types of opportunities for people to participate in, but they have to come with regulations. And at the same time, I think it's fair to require that they participate in the process. Look, when they use short-term rentals, they use our services, city services. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So if they use city services, they should be paying for it. Everyone else pays to use city services, so if they use city services, they should pay for it. And that should not be prohibited, and it should be an expectation. So my thought is, let's move with all deliberate speed on tackling this challenge, so that we can do it the right way and have the right expectation, and also inform our citizens that we're doing it the right way, because they're the ones who are enduring the challenges within their communities. And that's not fair to them. I'm sure I probably have some in my community. I don't know, I didn't pull up the list. But at the end of the day, it's important that we do it the right way. and everybody participate. If there are taxes to be gathered or to be collected, we need to collect taxes. Everybody needs to pay their way. That's just my 2 cents. Councilman Dodson, sir.
So
you have the floor.
there were some emails sent out to the council this week from Greg Garrett and Tony Goodwin. Were you made party to those emails?
Mr. Goodwin's, yes.
Okay, so there is an ad hoc committee in the area. Are you aware of that one?
That was in Mr. Goodwin's email.
Okay, good. Which would be another group to, along with the public, as Mark is suggesting, to participate in the process.
Vice Mayor Woody, sir, you have the floor.
My question is, have we been collecting taxes on short-term rentals? Or do we know?
I would
Don't know for sure, but I think the answer is no.
And that, that substantially a lot of lost revenue. Some of these short-term rentals are like $1,000 a night. There's one in Churchland that rents for that. So we definitely need to make sure that's part of the equation.
Well,
Councilwoman Thomas.
thank you. I just had a follow-up question on the tax. So through Airbnb, if I'm an Airbnb host and Dr. Dotson, you said you are a host, do they collect tax from the
Yes.
host that then goes to the city? Oh, it goes to the state, okay. So that's why we would not be getting the tax revenue right now? Is that?
Two different taxes.
Two different tax, okay, so we need to be the occupancy tax or some type of tax that's
lodging-
local
so
lodging
lodging.
tax,
Local
okay.
lodging, right.
Okay, and that's what we could enforce once we have some sort of ordinance through this process, is that correct?
We should likely defer to the Commissioner of Revenue.
Revenue,
set
that's
the
okay.
fees, so we can have a registration fee, your annual inspection fees,
Okay.
that those would be paid locally, and help defer the cost for enforcement and regulation.
Okay, all right. Yes, that's something that we should definitely look into. Because, yeah, we have there is a need for Airbnb, short-term rentals in Portsmouth, like everyone is saying. So finding some type of regulation and ordinance for it, it's definitely a priority I believe we should move forward with.
Councilwoman Bryant.
Thanks, Mayor. Question probably for you, Ms. Graham-Williams. If we create a new ordinance addressing this, would that be a similar situation as we had with entertainment venues and restaurants where they're already existing, they continue to operate? Or would this apply to,
I think it's a little bit different than that situation, because we're talking about regulation specific to a continuing use, which is very different than I'm already vested. You shouldn't change what I'm already vested. So the day after this is passed, your next client will fall under the regulations that we've issued. So it'll be a little bit different.
okay. And then what you were talking about, Mayor, with enforcement, what would that look like, given that there are all these Airbnb short-term rentals that are in place? What would the work be? Would you try and pull them up, track them down, notify them? Is that we just try and find where they are and then implement what we can, what we've
So I have some thoughts, and it's around the area that I don't regulate. Okay, so the annual requirement for the business license requires a business zoning clearance. So we would have that, and then that is taken to the Commissioner of Revenue for the business license. And so we would, through that process, build the inventory for the, I want to use the right word, the legally permitted operators in our community. So my thoughts are that it would be our next cycle of business license issuance after the ordinance is adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hugh.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So to this business license question, you mentioned that the Commissioner of the Revenue isn't issuing business licenses to short-term rentals now because of administrative burden. Is that ultimately his call, or can we write in the ordinance that a business license is required as a means of registering the business so that we know who's operating in the city?
It would just need to be congruent with our zoning so that all of that plays into it properly. So it is allowed under the statute that they've isolated, but it just needs to be congruent. So we have to figure out how that all works.
Okay.
Councilman Taylor, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a question, a couple statements. First one is when we talk about short-term rentals are not just limited to Airbnbs and those type of companies, but it's also inclusive of people that may let somebody stay at their house for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So I think it's important that we define that in the ordinance on what a short-term rental is, because I feel like that will open up a situation that is an unintended situation. In addition, I agree with my colleagues on finding a balance to support the quality of life, but also supporting business as well. And with that being said, I think that it's important that when we get the ordinance that we do have an enforcement plan with it. But I hope also that we're putting in a budget request, because you're going to need a lot of people to help enforce this,
Start with,
all ordinances and things of that nature. So I think having the plan and then having what it's going to take for your department to enforce these things through a budgetary expense, I think is also crucial as we consider all of this.
Thank you.
Can I jump in here? I'm not sure who's Vice Mayor. Crucial piece. That is one of my notes that I want to bring up. But the first thing I want to say is let's don't paint all short-term rentals with the same brush. Okay. Short-term rentals is not inherently bad. Absolutely, some are associated with bad things. Bad things happen. Everybody get a bad name from it, but just inherently short-term rentals is not a bad thing. Okay. When we talk about what it actually is, what it does for us is a couple things. One, it gives us more lodging capacity in our city. We're challenged with decent lodging capacity in our city. This is a way to absorb some of that and get people in our city that would not normally come to our city just because of the capacity of lodging that we have in our city. With proper regulation, taxing, and enforcement, that could be a revenue source for our city that we're not currently capturing. One of the things that we're going to talk about in our next presentation is the rate of revenue growth versus rate of expenditure growth. All right.
Yes, sir.
Those gaps are getting wider.
That's right.
So we're going to have to figure out a way to close those gaps. This by itself will not do it, but this is one of the things that can help us along that path. But it also provides some entrepreneur opportunities for our citizens. I have no idea who the people are that are doing this at this point. But I will tell you that once we start trying to regulate this particular industry, there's some unintended consequences that's going to happen. Everything that you vote on is going to have an unintended consequence. Some of you have heard me say this before, but what we really got to be comfortable with is creating winners and losers. Every ordinance you pass is going to create somebody that, hey, that's a great thing, it was great for me. And on the flip side of that, there's some people that it's going to be destructive for them in whatever they're trying to do. But what we're trying to do is minimize the negative effects as much as we can. Having said that, the more you have citizen engagement, if, you know, how many times do you want us to go back to that well for more information? Because the more we go back, the longer this process is going to take. So there has to be not just a happy medium in how we regulate this, but it needs to be a happy medium in how we gather information. And at some point, we just got to move forward. So those are the points that I want to bring up, just to make sure that, but most importantly, just don't paint all Airbnbs or short-term rentals, rather, with the same brush. They're not inherently bad.
Mayor, can I just point out a couple things that,
Attorney, you have the floor.
thank you, Councilman Tillage pointed out. I think that there also has to be some discussion about the economics of regulation. This is a big project that you're taking on. I know you probably have encountered that when you're looking at other jurisdictions that have tried this, but it is a big part of the effectiveness and what happens when you have regulations on the book that aren't enforced. It creates a negative impact, even worse impact on the community. So the economics of the regulation really should be addressed. So we know exactly the cost of what this is going to entail, and if it balances with the benefit that we're seeking, which is regulation. And so we need to be sure that that's considered.
And I would say, and we'll move on after this, I would agree. But as we all know, there's a cost to not do something too. And the truth of the matter is, for many years, when these things come online, we've been coming to the table late. And so we kind of create a situation and a scenario where we are today. And I'm sure there has to be a cost need benefit analysis done on this, but at the end of the day, we've got to do a better job of making sure that when these things come up front, that we're prepared to deal with them. And you're absolutely right. And I think we're doing that. I think our management team is definitely engaged, and I'm grateful that you guys are spending the time on this. It's important to our community. As we build our community and as we move forward in making this the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family, all these things are important. And I'm not going to look backwards and say, well, what happened in the past? We're here now. And we've got to deal with it as a team and as a group. And as you said, Mr. Carter, there's always a winner and a loser, but I don't think it has to be winners and losers. We don't have to look at it in terms of winners and losers. I think we look at it in terms of creating an environment where people can come and participate in the process, have roles and responsibilities as that takes place. But at the end of the day, we got to have rules. And rules have to be followed, because that brings credibility to the process as well. So thank you, guys. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Mr. Carter, you have the floor.
Ms. Jeanette Fernandez, Mr. Trey Burke, they're the next presenters this evening. We're going to talk about some budgetary outlooks. I guess Trey's going to start?
I'm going to start.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. All right. All right. Good evening, Mayor Glover, Vice Mayor Moody, members of City Council. This evening, we will be providing an overview of the fiscal year 2025 general fund expenditures and revenues, financial outlooks for the general fund, factors that may positively or negatively impact the financial outlook, and pose to you some questions regarding the city's values and priorities. Before I move to the next slide, I want to provide a big flashing disclaimer. All the information provided in the upcoming slides are not audited and are going to change over the coming months. There may be, probably will be, substantial revisions to the numbers in any direction, so it could be better, could be worse. And as such, these slides are only for discussion and consideration purposes. Looking at our general fund revenue performance through June 30, 2025, we can see the comparison between budgeted and actual revenues across various categories. The good news is that overall, revenues are tracking the budget. We've collected $313 million to date against a budget of $316 million. It's about $2.8 million, or within 1% of the budgeted projection. Highlights include real property taxes performing at $124 million against $130 budgeted, personal property taxes at $32 million against $37 million budgeted. With these, as mentioned before, with these property taxes, we do expect that there will be accruals or delinquent payments that come in that may moderate some of the shortages. State categorical aid performed robustly at $34 million, significantly above the $25 million budget. This is almost entirely due to VDOT. That came in much higher than we projected. The bar chart on the right shows our 3-year trend. 2023 total revenues were $297 million. In 2024, $318 million, and in 2025, $317 million. This does seem like a reduction, however, that's mostly, almost entirely due to one-time funding, notably the Hampton Roads Regional Jail closure in 23 and 24, where we had a rebate come back. We did not get that this year. Moving to our expenditure analysis by function for fiscal year 2025. This chart shows both budgeted amounts in gray and year-to-date actuals in blue. The Portsmouth Public School contribution continues to be our largest expenditure category at $76 million. Public safety expenses follow at $72 million, and most of the surplus there is being driven by unfilled positions in the police department and associated savings with the size of the force being low. General government spending is at $28 million. Judicial expenses are at 26, and public works general services are at $23 million. Most departments are tracking at or below their budgeted amounts, which is typical and kind of expected. If you have a budget, you can't really go over it, so you'd expect it to be either at or a little bit below. The gray portions above the blue bars represent the remaining budget authority or unspent budget at the end of the year. This slide provides a comprehensive view of our fiscal year performance on a monthly basis. The chart on the left shows the cumulative revenue and expenditures, totals by month, with the benchmark line being a month-by-month equal revenues by month, and it accumulates steadily and tracking and revenues are accumulating steadily and tracking the benchmark line, which is what we want. The right chart breaks down personal property receipts and our net of revenues and expenditures, showing the typical spike at the end of the fiscal year when most payments are due. You'll see in May and June, there's $23 million collected on that. And with that, you see we go from an all-year deficit, and then in May, all of a sudden we're in the black again. We do see the expected volatility through the year. And so, as I said, you just kind of had to expect that there's going to be a lag through the year, and that gets made up in the last 2 months. With that, I will introduce the city's CFO, Ms. Jeanette Fernandez, and she will take us through the rest of the presentation.
Good evening. Hi. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, City Attorney, and City Manager. First, I would like to say and express my gratitude to be here. This is my first time presenting to you all. Gratitude to you all. I do find public service to be a calling of sorts, so I feel both humbled and honored to be able to present alongside Trey on the City of Portsmouth's financial outlook. What you have before you is a general fund operating budget, trend analysis, and forecast. Trey and I reviewed historic spending, revenue, and data going back to FY 2021. We then used that data to forecast for the period of 2027 through 2030. We looked at, it's important to note, we looked at multiple forecasting methodologies, including rolling averages, exponential triple smoothing algorithms, 3-year averages, 5-year averages, before landing on the one that is in front of you. What we found was that the rate of growth on the expenditure side outpaced the rate of growth on the revenue side over that period of data availability. just a little taste or a nugget of data, between 2021 and 2025, for example, expenditures grew by about 11%, revenues grew by 6%. So those relative paces are what construct the visualization before you, where a growing deficit is shown in the shaded region created by the dashed lines. It's very important to note that this is not an uncommon trend, and it is not unique to Portsmouth. In fact, most governmental jurisdictions face this exact problem, and that's because the drivers of their cost really have almost no relationship to revenues. So as we think about the drivers of our cost, it's important to know, and again, this is true for many governments, that these drivers of expenditure growth are items that many would consider to be must-fund items, or categories of spending that we cannot evade. That includes things like our debt service, our contributions to our pension systems, or they are items that are accepted as the cost of doing business, such as our personnel services and our utilities and fuel. All of these spending drivers, and they're listed here by order of magnitude, are generally items that we can exercise pretty limited control over. And I reiterate that this is not an uncommon trend. This is pretty widespread, and we see it as our job to help you all devise a thoughtful approach to navigating those trends and tempering excessive cost growth where it makes sense. So as any time I do a forecast for you all, I will always present you with, I will highlight, underline, and bold the fact that it is just a forecast. It's our job to navigate those trends, but they are just estimates. And the reality is that a myriad of unforeseen circumstances can take hold and pivot any trend in a different direction. We just witnessed that with the pandemic. As part of acknowledging that these are only estimates, I will always also try to make known to you the factors that could improve our financial outlook and the factors that could worsen it. To that end, on the end of factors that could worsen our financial trends, the first among them is the decline in federal contributions to the social safety net programming. This is both speculative but also somewhat concrete, as we saw with the One Big Beautiful Bill. And it does appear that this is an ambition of this administration to shift the cost burden of social services back to the state and local governments. The next item is our labor market volatilities. And while the labor market tightening is dissipating a little bit, there remains some pretty intense skills gaps. And those skills gaps, they constrain not only the city of Portsmouth's ability to deliver on your all's goals, but they also constrain our contractual staff as well. Correct. So it's widespread regionally and nationally, those skills gaps occur. The next three items are much more speculative in nature, but by their order of magnitude, I think they're worth mentioning, and they of course include any economic contraction, declines in population, and of course revenue volatilities. Now, in terms of things that can improve our financial trends, the good news here is that a lot of the things on this list are things that are already being done. The chief among them, or the first among them, is revitalization. And I want to point out that revitalization is tricky because its effects can't really be forecasted in something like the presentation that we showed and the data that we showed. Although we do love to revel in the revenues once they're realized, we can't really project the multipliers with a level of accuracy. The next item, though, is of course continuing our discipline in the limited use of and contribution to our reserve funds. Third is our investment into operational efficiencies and including the adoption of new technologies, the strategic adoption of new technologies. I believe our continued discipline in maintaining manageable levels of borrowing are going to carve out a path towards a AAA rating. And then, of course, revenue growth and diversification will always improve our financial outlook as well. So as we shift to a mindset of solutioning, we wanted to prompt you all with some key questions that we would like to shape your thinking here. We know that you all had a council retreat and you defined your mission and vision for this great city. And we know that your aspiration for the next retreat is to define clearly some strategic goals to support that mission. And as we think about that, I would encourage you all to head into that retreat asking not just what are our strategic goals, but what time horizon do those goals lock into? The long term or the short term? What operational capacity do your goals necessitate? That is, what do city departments need in order to effectuate your goals? What existing programs or services might need to be reconsidered to fund your goals and your strategic initiatives? And of course, selfishly, I include on there, how do we prioritize financial sustainability through periods of growth and contraction in both revenue and in spending? And with that, I'd like to say thank you one more time, and we can open it up to questions.
Councilman Dodson, so you have
So I've received some data from y'all's office that to try and construct a mathematical model of our city, and I'm not having a lot of success with it.
Okay.
But the model is, and what I'm trying to say is, what of these ideas that you just listed on that last page can generate this money for us, and how much can each of these generate? In other words, our housing market, if we have more low-end housing, it doesn't contribute. If we have more high-end housing, then we can generate these revenues. How much high-end housing can we get, and is it worth our time to give it attention? Same way with business. Do we want, single, little, small car washes, or is there a larger manufacturing business that we can bring in, and how much will that generate? So when we go into our retreat, it would be nice to know if there is some way of generating this model to say, here's where we can give our attention that will get us the most bang for the buck. And I don't know that any of us on this council have that expertise to generate that information. I don't know if the council's interested in it, but I know I would be interested in sitting down and seeing, is there some way to bring that data to the council so that we can define a focus in our retreat to say, these are the areas that would bring us the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah.
The Holiday Insight development, depending upon how that could generate twice, two times.
Yeah.
I mean, the range of what that can generate in tax revenues without consuming services.
Yeah.
And I think we need to give that attention. Which of these generate revenue without consuming services? And can we as a council affect any of that and get our biggest bang for the buck? I'd love to see if we can get that some of the retreat. And if there's any way that I can arrange to sit down with you and talk with you and see if that's possible to bring that data. I'd love to have some time.
Can I respond?
Yes, Manager Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Now, Ms. Fernandez is our CFO.
Right.
She's going to crunch all the numbers that appear at her. But she's not the one that's going to do the economic outlook
That's
for
correct.
us. That's a different group for us. We can absolutely sit down. We can talk about some of these things, but she's not the one to put that burden on.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to feel out is where.
And that's a good point. To your point, when we had our review from our rating agencies, they came and gave a real good economic overview of what drivers, what industries, what we need to look at. I would also add that economic development is the place that we need to go to understand what our strategy is in terms of revenue attraction and bringing businesses to the city. That is where we need to have that conversation with the manager, and he understands that. So I agree with you. I think that's where we start in terms of looking, because we've had the discussion already about clustering different industries. What do we wish to and desire to attract to our city to make our city grow and provide additional revenue? So I think that's a conversation. Would you agree, Mr. Carter?
Absolutely. I would also, as a young lady that works in the PDC, she's an economist. She came and did a presentation for us a while back.
Yeah.
She would be a great asset for the exact thing that you're talking about. That's what she does all day, you know what I mean? So I can point you at her.
I remember the presentation.
We can get her.
Right.
I would just add, I do know, I am familiar with some of this. It is always hard to define multiplier effects of revitalization and economic development.
Thank you, that's what I'm looking for.
I will say one thing that could be very helpful is just building a profile of your city, starting there. And as you all have discussed, rating agencies are usually very good with building that profile and then looking across the country to see where similar things exist and how investments play played out in those cities. But it is very speculative. So it's never going to be a 1 to 13, right? You invest $1 here, you're going to get 13. It's not quite that scientific as much as we would like it to be, but there are some rules of thumb too that we can investigate.
Thank you. And thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like to say, Ms. Hernandez?
Fernandez with an F as in Frank,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, we got you now. One of the things that I often think about when I look at the budget, and I appreciate this, what you just shared with us, our revenues are not growing to the level of our expenses. And part of our responsibility when we talk about adding new programs, new services, collective bargaining, and all these things that will have a financial impact on our city, we have to understand that what's in the best interest of the whole. Because we can't print money, as Mr. Carter says. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a number of things that are coming in front of us that's going to require substantial commitment financially. And so we've got to be very thoughtful of how that's going to play out, because to your point, we can't sit here and make decisions. Now, I know my colleagues like to say, well, we won't be here and we want to put things in place. Well, the things that we want to put in place, we better ensure that they're not a burden on our financial situation, because at the end of the day, those dollars are not just going to grow on trees. And so I just want us all, as we think through these processes, it's good when folks come and tell you that they want certain things, but we all know that certain things, most things come at a cost. And it's not just the financial cost when we look at some of these things that we want to spend money in. When you make significant changes enterprise-wide, that's a people cost. And it ultimately ends up being a financial cost. So municipalities, we don't always have the latitude, perhaps. And in a city like Portsmouth, where 52% of our revenue we derive from our property tax, that's a big deal. And a lot of our land, we don't get revenue from that. So it's important, as we always go through this process, to know some things, as Mr. Carter says, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. But the tough decisions have to be in line with ensuring that our city is financially sound so that we can do the things that we need to do for our people. Councilman Hugo.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you both for the brief, and thank you for numbering the slides. The rest of your staff could take a lesson numbering slides, because now I can say, could you pull up slide 6, please?
Yes.
I think they do that so you can't say that.
So then we end up, no back, no, we'll move forward. So it would be helpful, I think, as we're preparing for the retreat, to understand what assumptions you all made for those 2 dotted lines. So for instance, if you assumed somewhere in there the Holiday Inn site comes online and the revenue stream suddenly appears, what did you assume? So as we're talking about when should we be pushing to get that thing online, if you assumed it's going to happen in 2029, well then that ain't going to work for us, maybe. So to understand your assumptions would be helpful. And then on slide 8, so I get labor market volatilities, you say tied to skills gaps. So this is an important conversation that we need to be having with the school system, because if there are assumptions, or if somebody has insight in more than just our intuitive insight of where the skills gaps are, then we need to be having the conversation with schools around what are we doing to address those skills gaps, so that it's our people that are being trained to go plug those gaps. And again, that's not you guys, but there's somebody out there that you all got this information from that we maybe ought to invite to the retreat to have this conversation. And then similarly, over on the right-hand side for revenue growth and diversification, what are the ideas from outside of the collection around the table, and who can we invite in to kind of toss around those ideas that knows enough about the city to know, and we're not going to bring a BMW plant inside the boundaries of Portsmouth because there isn't the real estate to bring a BMW plant in here, but given kind of the landscape that we have, what are the realistic revenue growth opportunities that we ought to be pursuing? And I know the economic development folks have that kind of insight, so that's a piece of it, but there's some folks outside the city that probably know us well enough to make some recommendations for things that we ought to be pursuing.
Could I would just to address, if that's okay, a couple of the items. On the core assumptions, we can certainly share with you the core assumptions used throughout. To give you a flavor of what we did, we looked at these different methodologies and we picked the one that seemed to be the most realistic. So sometimes when you do a triple smoothing estimate, it just looks really, really rosy, and then other times it looks like our costs go, way off the rails. And part of that is because you all have had big one-time revenues and big one-time expenses in the last few years, which can kind of mess with how the data looks. And so some of what we did was to manually tamp down the projection in the out year to put something in front of you that was a little more realistic. So I wanted to address that. I know the other items on skills gap and revenue growth are.
We'll take that.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I guess one other point, so I get it that this is general fund, but
Yeah.
there's a whole CIP out there that is its own elephant that we have to eat, and understanding how much debt we're going to incur, or what other strategies we've talked about some strategies to pursue CIP outside of just incurring additional debt. And so I think that's another important piece of the discussion. It's kind of the other half of the discussion, if you will, that we need to have when we retreat.
Yeah, there's several other funds besides the general fund. This is the ones that the tax revenues are funding. All right, this is the fund that I describe it as things that you spend money on that don't make money.
That's right.
All right. Now, we have some other funds that we have around the general fund that we also need to take in consideration as we look at the entire financial picture of the city. This is just one element of it, but it is the one that affects most people.
Councilwoman Thomas, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. Thank you. So, Mr. Carter, something you just said made me have a question. You said this represents things we spend money on that don't make money.
Yes, ma'am.
But there is for example, for public education, we spend money on public education. Doesn't bring back dollars per se, but there is some sort of cost benefit that we get from that we can associate with a dollar not a revenue, but there's some sort of cost benefit. Is that taken into account when we do the projection for the future? Because today's investment in, for example, education can lead to some of these factors that were listed in that table that can improve financial trends. Do we account for a dollar? Why are you smiling, Mr. Carter? Okay, is there some type of some sort of cost factor that is associated with investment today equals dollars tomorrow?
I'll try this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and maybe that is two different things, but when you said it, it made me question it. Okay.
What happens with those intangible type things, absolutely, they factor into what happens in our future, all right? But when we do budgeting, we do budgeting on real dollars that's here today, okay? Absolutely, schools we cannot function as a community without schools. All right? But schools don't bring in revenue to that budget. Right. It has a factor on, hey, we can grow our city, we can build better houses, we can get more employers, we can raise our tax base. All those things are things that we hope to happen as a result of our investment in schools. But as a entity that supplies a dollar amount back into that budget today, that's not it.
That's what I'm talking about.
But there are other things too that's like that. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, okay. All right. I got your point. I just wanted to
Yeah,
make a clarification on that based on looking at this table right here of like factors that can improve. All of these things will require some sort of investment. So I just wanted to make a clarification there. Thank you.
no problem.
Mrs. Fernandez, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. This is the kind of stuff, this is the kind of stuff I love to do. I could sit at an Excel spreadsheet all day and be energized by it, so.
That's a special.
And I'm glad there's people like you.
Look forward to our one-on-one.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
No, thank you all. I'll leave this here.
Carter.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That concludes the presentations that we have for you this evening. As a summary of what we're about to get into, we have 4 public hearings. One for the Innovation District, one's on Harper Avenue, one's on West Norfolk Road, and one's on Victory Boulevard. All 4 of those will be before you this evening. As we get into the city manager's report, we have a total of 5 ordinances, all dealing with budget appropriations from different entities around our state. Victim Witness Program appropriation of $564,882 from DCJS. PFAS settlement funds, approximate $150,714. For 3M settlement for public utilities water testing, supply testing and treatment. Radiological Emergency Preparedness Program, a $1,000 VDEM grant to support training and equipment. Hazardous Material Emergency Response Funds, approximately $30,000 from VDEM to support Portsmouth leadership as the Southside Regional Hazmat Response Team. And finally, another opioid settlement appropriation. We're going to accept $194,168 in opioid settlements for behavioral health services to use for approved abatement purposes. Those are the items that will be before us this evening for your consideration. Thank you for your time and attention this evening. That's all that I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. We're now moving to council liaison reports. Do we have any reports at this time?
I do.
Councilman Hubert. You have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor. So, a liaison report related to our crime and gun violence task force. I had a chance this morning to attend a briefing that was hosted by the Virginia Center for Public Safety. It was in our police headquarters at 206 High Street. The presentation was done by Joshua Horwitz, who works in the Center for Gun Violence Solutions at Johns Hopkins University. You may remember, Mayor, that our Youth Leadership Development Group, our Saturday morning group, last year took a trip to Johns Hopkins to talk with Dr. Horwitz and his team about gun violence and the challenges that gun violence poses. He reciprocated by coming to town today and spending time with us to talk about the research that Johns Hopkins has been doing around gun violence, the causes, some of the effects, and some ideas on things that should be looked at the state level, at the local level, at the organizational level. So now I'm talking about grassroots organizations, churches, so think Portsmouth United. And so it was a really engaging conversation, and I want to thank Dr. Mark Hayes, who runs our Youth Leadership Development Program, made the connection to Johns Hopkins, and invited Josh to come and speak with us today. good insight on tackling this very challenging problem.
Thank you, sir. Also, real quick, wanted to give acknowledgement to our wonderful nonprofit here in the city of Portsmouth, Mercy Chefs. Last Friday, we were able to have national attention come to the city of Portsmouth with Good Morning America. And the governor showed up and presented Gary LeBlanc and Anne LeBlanc with a proclamation for the amazing services that they provide, not only to our city, our region, but to our state and the country and the world. I think it was over 30 million meals that they have served since they have been in business. And the important part about that is they're an organization that really brings hope to people and really makes it different in folks' lives. One of the quotes that I made, and Gary ended up putting it on a t-shirt, dignity should never be a casualty of a disaster. And so we're grateful that Mercy Chefs is right here in the city of Portsmouth. And if you get a chance to see any of those volunteers that work for that organization, Councilwoman Thomas joined me at the Good Morning America presentation. We were proud to represent, so just wanted to let everybody know. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our meeting. We do have a need to go into closed session. So if I could ask Vice Mayor Moody to read the closed session motion.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A1 for the purpose of discussing and considering appointments to boards and commissions.
Second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in closed session.
Only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting is concluded.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes.
Thank you.
That adjourns the meeting, and I'll see everybody at 7 o'clock.
Got a nice little.